Welcome to the first mailbag of Season 6. Lots of questions today, lots of big questions, so let's dive right in. The first question comes from Ruben, and Ruben writes, I'm part of a large group of 9 players. Our group started in January of 2019 with a DM, a great friend of mine, who has never run a campaign before. I offered to help him, so he insisted that we scrub our current campaign and that I assist him in coming up with a new campaign. So there I went, weeks and weeks of studying up, reading lore, looking up videos, finding this show. Long story short, I had the rug pulled from under me and replaced with another player who had been DM for other groups and was significantly more experienced than me or my friend combined. My friend said they wanted his help instead. However, rather than getting upset, I got determined that after all my research and story writing, I feel I can be a valuable asset to help DM. I just don't know how I can do that if I never get the chance. It goes ... from there, but I understand your question. What should you do with this massive amount of knowledge that you've accrued? You were really excited about being a co-DM, or at least being an assistant to the DM. You probably already know my first answer, which is, you're the DM now. You want to DM? You're interested in DMing? You have all this knowledge? Why don't you become the Dungeon Master? What are you afraid of? Which is not a patronizing question. There's a lot that people are afraid of. Imposter syndrome is very strong in DMs. They are afraid of not being as good as other DMs. They want to treat their players to the best DM experience, and they constantly worry that someone else could be giving them that experience better. You've done the studying. You've done the preparation. All you gotta do is take that leap. And it is always messy. I don't know a single DM who's rocked their first campaign, first one-shot. It is going to be odd. It might even be, something I'm very afraid of, awkward. But I'm not here to push you off that cliff. In fact, I'm concerned that this show only showcases one style of DMing. My style, which is a very improvised, performer-based style of DM. Lots of character-based interactions, reading the room, seeing what players are into in the moment. But there are many, many different styles of DMing. There are miniature gamer DMs who focus more on combat, tell the story through action. There are director cinematographer style DMs who explain everything through sweeps of cameras and close-ups. And even those have variants, from Wes Anderson to Michael Bay. There are cartographer DMs who tell the story through their world. That might be a lot like Fallout. The character interactions might be a little stale, but there's this whole globe to explore, and always a mystery over the horizon. There are artist DMs, who avidly avoid NPC interactions, but produce great art that inspire their players' imaginations. From your email, I know that you enjoy story and script writing. You enjoyed doing all this research, so you might be a writer DM. You might tell your story through journals, through messages, through notes that are scattered about your world. You could focus more on quest boards, or town criers, or formal dictates from the king, all things you can easily script instead of perform. You could be a lore master who has a very intricate and complicated world full of mystery, but you have it all planned out perfectly. A great example of this is Dark Souls. There are very few character interactions in that game. The world is bleak. It is a ruin of what it once was. But everything hints at a greater mystery. Every item has a description on it that helps tell the story of the world. Very rarely are you having a one-on-one conversation with an NPC. And even then, it was translated, so it's a little awkward in the first place, but it's very awkward because they're all insane from the nature of the world. This is, of course, where I would point you, because I love DMing so much. But there are opportunities in the world for co-DMs. They can be extremely useful, but in my experience, they often take on NPC duties. The co-DM may submit lore. They might help plan a tactics encounter. But in the playing of the game, it's very useful to have a co-DM because now you don't have to talk to yourself when you're playing 2 characters. They can also play those NPCs in combat versus the DM, and now you don't have as big of a conflict of interest. But it doesn't sound like the character part of the co-DMing is what interests you. And it's very easy for that partnership to devolve into more of a teacher's pet situation, where you're the one who rolls out the battle mat, gets the miniatures in place, passes out the handouts, manages the initiative while the DM looks up the page of the monster manual. That might not be the level of inclusion you're looking for as a writer type in this situation. You've got a big group? Maybe this could work out. The party splits when exploring a city. You both dungeon master half the party. But you're writing into this show, so I encourage you to pursue that writer type DM. Einar asks, this spring I started DMing my first ever campaign. I'm running the Lost Mines of Phandelver that I got with my starter set, but with new characters that the players got to create in a session 0. We're starting to get far enough in the campaign that their characters are getting more developed, and I'm thinking about creating subplots specifically for them. My question is, how best to incorporate this into a campaign that's already set? I've already taken a few liberties with the guilds and a few of the characters in the campaign, and although I don't mind changing things to fit better, I don't think I'm ready for them to step off the set path just yet. Do you have any tips about adding story to engage players without sidetracking them too much? Also, should I try to have subplots for all characters or just slowly one by one? You're right to be cautious about side plots. Side plots become side quests, and D&D isn't the fastest game in the world. Any DM that has had a player character die, and the rest of the party quests to resurrect them, knows how massive of a fart off that can be. It can take months to get back to the main plot. So what you're looking to do is sprinkle in some side story. A little bit of so-and-so's father was here. A little bonus room there. A mysterious gift left outside the door of their inn room. An NPC who recognizes them, or knows a little of their backstory. But these sprinklings are going to pose questions, and questions need answering. And at some point, you're gonna have to go off the beaten path and complete that side quest. Get those answers for your party so it's a satisfactory interaction with mystery. Now, there's nothing wrong with a question leading to another question leading to another question, as long as there is an eventual good answer. And it's not hard to ignite a player's curiosity. You could have them looking out the window in a city, and they see two NPCs talking, they can't hear what they're saying, and then one points at the window, and then they both split up. What was that about? What does that have to do with me? The player may even make it easy for you to supply that answer because they'll go, oh, were those assassins sent for me? And you can make a little mental note, this player wants to have assassins after them maybe. That'll be the answer to that question. But the question chain continues. Why are there assassins after them? Who hired them? Who does the person that did the hiring work for? You could bake that answer into the primary quest. You could say it's King Grohl of Cragmaw Castle. But there's a certain point where our brains say something is too convenient, and that's where we get into conspiracy theory. It's way more rewarding of a climax to the players to have that mystery solved outside of the main quest. But as you say, you don't want your players to be heavily sidetracked. So check with yourself while you're writing these mysteries and these eventual side quests. Does the main story still hold up? Is my eventual campaign conclusion still satisfying without these side quests being completed? Even more extreme, does my main plot hold up if I were to lose a player? What you're going for is the hard mode. It is way easier to pick the player of the day and have that be a pseudo one-shot inside your campaign where we deal with some element of their backstory. You're going to have to present a very tight schedule. We don't have time to go chase those two whispering individuals in the streets. We have to get back to the main quest. And you also need to keep a very tight list of all the questions you pose so we can make sure they all get satisfactory answers someday. And to paraphrase a quote from Lee Childs, who writes the Jack Reacher series, a delicious cake is not about the ingredients, the layers, the icing. It is about having a hungry family who waited 4 hours for that cake. As to your second question, which character should I focus on first for this sprinkling? This is a great opportunity to reward that player who is most committed to your game. Maybe you're using the milestone XP setting, but this player makes it to every single session. So you're going to reward them with that mysterious gift or interaction. There might also be that player, and most tables have one, that is crazy about their backstory and really wants you to use it. There may also be a backstory that bakes in perfectly to the primary adventure you're on. Maybe you can use Cragmaw's castle. We're not going to use King Groll, but the castle was made by a noble wizard, and we're going to hide a wizard's spellbook in a hidden room for them. That wizard's spellbook may be their father's, and down the road we go through Mystery Town. Dr. Jalapeno writes, I'm gearing up for an in-person homebrewed campaign starting in the next few weeks. It'll be my first time writing a campaign. I want it to be largely character motivation driven. How much or how little do you write beforehand? I don't want them to dream up their characters and then have to wait a month before I'm ready to go, and have them lose that momentum. I plan on starting at level 3. Dr. Jalapeno goes on to say that they have a world map prepared, an intricate map of the first major city which will happen around level 8, and the general lore of the world worked out. You got a great start to this, and with a few weeks to go, you're way ahead of the normal DM schedule. Now it's time to focus in on that starting point. And the best adventures have humble beginnings. The Moisture Farm for Luke Skywalker, Privet Drive for Harry Potter, the Shire for hobbits. And we want that simple Hamlet, small village style beginning so our world feels bigger and more complex in comparison when we get to that level 8 major city you've planned. You have made things a little more difficult by starting at level 3, but I certainly don't blame you for doing that. The character sheets, the playstyles are way more interesting if we just jump ahead. And if you got experienced players, let's make that leap. And your world's lore could make this easier or more difficult. If your world is full of guilds and taverns and inns, there is a structure for hero work. Then level 3 players can arrive on the scene, have a job to do for an organization, and get to work. But if it's more of a low fantasy world without those structures for adventurers, if their powers are unique or special, that's where your starting quest is going to rely on their backstory. You need to explain how they got that powerful. All the same, I encourage you to plan that first quest. Plan the beginning of your adventure. And maybe humble isn't the right word. Isolated might be more useful. Contained. A tomb with a mummy, a cave with an owlbear, climbing a mountaintop to a manticore's nest. A dungeon with a hooked horror. A swamp with a green hag. Basically, plan the adventure activity that'll get these players interacting with each other. How that starts is up to you, but account for your players' personalities. They're real personalities. If they're social butterflies and they love role-playing and talking, then it's perfectly fine that we stumble through the tavern and the quest board and taking the job and being like, do you want to come with us? Oh yeah, let's make a party and go. On the other extreme, they might be shy or nervous to roleplay, so we want that adventure already in motion. We're already going up the mountain to the Manticore. And there's plenty of in-betweens. They might be all sitting in taverns, of course all in corners because they're all badasses. A stranger walks in, transforms into a werewolf, and starts attacking the patrons of the bar. Greatness is thrust upon our heroes. They reveal that they have these powers, that they can defend the town, and they are selected to go investigate where this werewolf came from and defeat the green hag who put this all in motion. Depending on that start point, that might last you 3 sessions. And when those sessions end, that's when we transition into something more character-oriented. The players have bonded over their experience, we've had some opportunities to roleplay to find our personality, and then our warlock reveals that they have a soul contract they're trying to break, or our paladin reveals that they're hunting down an evil wizard. And that's when you start writing those particular backstory, character-driven campaign ideas. Keep the adventure simple, and plan the activities part of it. Those activities will inspire player conversation, player interaction. If you try to start a character-based story by everyone sitting around one table, you're gonna get a lot of renegades and rebels. People's ideas of what their characters are, not what they actually look like on the battlefield or solving a puzzle. Let them have those activities, those in-between interactions, and then let them lay on the roleplay once they've had time to experiment. So when you ask, how much do I write beforehand? I would have my planned activities for the day. And to use our previous example, the werewolf breakout fight, an NPC, maybe the barkeep who encourages them to pursue the hag, and the hag fight figured out. On that hag, there might be a black orb. And who knows what that's for at this point? It might be a artifact for the dark wizard the paladin's hunting. It might be the physical manifestation of the soul contract for that warlock. But we've got an opportunity to stretch our legs. Maybe I had a couple of days to go over the character sheets, and I could make some unique traps or challenges for that journey through the swamp to the hag's hut. But we got that ball rolling. Whether we go back to the tavern, become heroes of this town, sit around a table, talk about our pasts, or you return to the guild hall, get paid, and get the next quest, that's about the makeup of your world. At that point, they're in charge of their own choices, and we let those characters start to dictate and drive the plot. As for your final question, is there anything else you should prepare beforehand to help the game run quickly? I would take that world map and shrink it down. Don't go giving away the globe early. You might want to make changes later on. Pick a district, a region, a hemisphere. Maps are great props, quest rewards. They inspire the imagination. People want to go places on there. So hold some of that back. Let them find outdated maps, or let a world map be a gift from a king. Make it rare. Not only because it's cool, but because you might want to change something. Players make mistakes. They go the wrong direction sometimes. You might have to reorganize. And thank you everyone for your emails for this first mailbag episode of Season 6. We took 3 big questions today. Each of these could easily have been their own episode. I've got a lot of little questions I wasn't able to get to. Thank you everybody who wrote in. You may find your email in a future mailbag episode, or it may inspire a future full episode. If you would like to email the show, head over to kylefergusson.com, 2 S's in Fergusson, and use the contact link there. You can also post questions in the Discord, and there's a link on that website. Music was by Brian Griffith, and I'll see you next week with more DM Gives Inspiration.